Hi everybody, and welcome to the next edition of It's a Fair Question. And look, I am no longer in the Zoom world, I am in the real world, and what a joy it is to be here in the foothills of the Cairngorms, right at the heart of our country. Behind me, the Ua Lochans. Isn't it a beautiful landscape, reminding us what a fantastic country we have to live in? Today I'm going to be speaking to Steve Aisthorpe. Steve has recently published this book, Rewilding the Church. We've got lots to talk about, so let's get on then, and let me introduce you to Steve Aisthorpe. So Steve, thanks so much for joining me today to chat together. Your book is entitled Rewilding the Church. Now that suggests to me that your thinking is that perhaps we have tamed the church has become too tame, or are you seeing even more that possibly the church has tamed the Lord of the church?
A bit of both, I think. Yeah, I mean, I would use the word domesticated, perhaps. When church has become something that's predictable, then you have to ask the question, are we still following Jesus, who I think is often quite unpredictable? And so, yeah, I'm suggesting that we need to think about re-engaging in the adventure of faith, because following Jesus is always that. And, you know, if we talk about the renewal of the church, that begins with the renewal of us, because we are the church. So, yeah, you're spot on.
You got me right away when you talked about adventure of the church, because that appeals to me right away. What was the inspiration? What was the spark that caused you to write this book in the first place?
So it started for me 4 years ago. I was just finishing writing a previous book, which was all about some research I'd been doing amongst Christians who had disengaged from church as we traditionally think of it. And in the final chapter, I was trying to get a glimpse of the future. I was trying to look ahead and thinking, if this is the trajectory of things, where are we going to be? And it just happened that at the same time I was writing that, a book group I was part of was reading a book called Feral by George Monbiot, which is all about the environmental idea of rewilding. And so as I was writing on the one hand and reading on the other, I just saw all these connections. I thought, this is incredible. You know, on the one hand, I was reading about landscape which is overmanaged and tamed, and how a lot of what we do in the name of conservation is actually preserving a man-made environment. And on the other hand, I was wrestling with church and how that has often become constrained and kind of stepped aside almost from that adventure of faith that we're talking about.
So I want to come back to the question of environment, but first of all, to refer to your first book, The Invisible Church, you mentioned it there. The idea that there are people out there who have disengaged from the church, but you're suggesting they may still be on the journey of faith. They're just no longer seeing the church as the vehicle through which to pursue that journey. Is that about what you're suggesting?
It's a fact. I'm not just suggesting it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a big surprise to me. When I did the original research, I came across so many people who were deeply impressive people of faith, you know, deeply committed Christians, and yet for a whole variety of reasons, which is explored in that book, of course, have stepped outside of traditional church. They're still part of the church with a big C, and I think, you know, one of my themes in both of the books is that there's one church and many expressions of it.
So Steve, when I come at any book, I guess I'm wanting to know what's at the heart of it. What is really the main point involved? Tell us, Rewilding the Church, what is the key point to it?
So I guess the key parallel, if you like, I see between rewilding in terms of the environment and the church is that at the heart of the natural environment is what biologists call biotic potential. There's this inbuilt urge to regenerate. And if you doubt that, just leave your garden for a couple of years. Lift a paving slab and just leave it open for a little while, and nature bounces back. You know, there's this, what's one naturalist has called bounce back ability in nature. And when we think about the church, well, at the heart of the church is what Paul called an immeasurable power. It's the very same power that brought Jesus back from the dead. You know, resurrection power is at the heart of our faith. And so the church too has this bounce back ability. And we see it at work in nature when we let go, when we step back and we let nature do its thing. And I guess I'm proposing in the book that we need to be a bit less heavy on the management on church and focus more on following Jesus and see what emerges from that.
Okay, so that's a difficult sell right now. You're talking about the potential within the church, its ability to bounce back, and yet we're part of a generation that has known almost nothing apart from church decline. So just to clarify, you're suggesting that if somehow we let go control, and allowed perhaps a more natural thing to happen in the business of following Jesus, we might see some turnaround in terms of the fortunes and the life of the church.
Okay, what this book is not about is how do we save the church? I think that's actually part of our problem, that we have this desire, how can we save the church? Help, the church is in decline, what are we going to do? Whereas actually what our faith is about is following Jesus, becoming more like him, listening to what he's telling us to do and responding to that. And what comes out of that is church. And part of our difficulty is I think we've had a preconceived idea of what good church looks like, how we'd like church to be, and then we manage things towards that end. Whereas the whole concept of rewilding is that we don't know the outcome. Okay. It's about the process. So when an estate owner around here, for example, decides they're going to stop managing the estate for grouse shooting, for example, and rewild it, they step back, they maybe take down some fences, but they don't know what's going to happen. And that's part of the adventure.
Tell me a little bit about the landscape we're in right now, Steve. I mean, it's stunning. I just wish folks could be here with us right now. And it feels kind of wild in some ways. Is this what we're after? Is this unmanaged, or is there a distance still to go before we'll see anything that is more authentic and natural? Okay, so we're in a really interesting place here actually, because in that direction is the Cairngorms, and 5 of the landowners there have actually come up with a 200-year plan to rewild that area. So they are culling those species that kind of dampen regeneration, and they're letting the trees and other stuff kind of bounce back. And on the other side over here, the Monolith Hills, there are traditional sporting estates, and they're managing it for a purpose. So there's sheep grazing, and they're encouraging a large number of grouse and a good number of red deer, etc. So we're right here, we've got 2 very contrasting approaches, if you like. Yeah. When I come into the wild places, Steve, which I love to do, that's my happy place, it's where I get real about stuff. I guess I've always got an end point in mind. I may be looking to climb a particular mountain or go through a valley or arrive at a destination. You're suggesting, I think, that in this business of following Jesus, we might not necessarily know where we're going. So it's about trusting, isn't it? It's about trusting that Jesus is going to lead us.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but certainly in my experience, when I think I know I'm going with Jesus, where I think I know I'm going in my journey of faith, often it ends up being somewhere slightly different. And, you know, personally, for us as Christian people, life is about that rhythm of listening and responding. What do we believe we need to be doing to be faithful, and then doing it, stepping out in faith, in courage, and that's a kind of constant process. And the funny thing is, when I work with churches, which is my kind of day job, you know, working with congregations, and I get people talking about their faith journey as an individual, there's usually a real buzz, a lot of excitement. People often say, oh, we never have these conversations. But people have a journey, and there's milestones along the way, and they get excited when they talk about it. But somehow when we do it together, when we're church, we've not been so adept, let's say, at that listening and responding, and kind of walking a road of faith rather than that kind of predictable managed route that you're touching on.
So Steve, here we are, and what a stunning view over to Sgurgui and the Cairngorms beyond. You've been a climber all your life, including time in the high ranges of the Himalaya and so forth. What was it that first drew you to outdoor spaces, and in particular to climbing mountains?
So I grew up in probably the flattest place in the UK. I grew up in Lincolnshire.
Right.
And I remember when I was about 12 or 13, I think, I went with the scout group to the Peak District. And I was just gobsmacked by just seeing the hills. And we walked up a small hill. I mean, it was probably no bigger than what we just walked up here today. And I just loved it so much. And I think that experience, combined with the fact that actually I was rubbish at football. So, you know, when you're that age as a boy, you know, in my generation at least, if you can't play football, you know, well, what are you good for? And also through the Scouts, I then got into rock climbing a bit, and I found, oh, actually, this is something I can do. Can't play football, but I can do this. And yeah, ever since then, I've not looked back, really. Yeah.
And of course, it's a dangerous pastime. At least, you know, we can't take it to the extremes, and you've been in some of those extreme places. I remember chatting with you some time back, and you told me about an experience on an ice wall in Norway, which became in many ways a spiritual or a very monumental moment in your life in many ways. Do you want to share a wee bit of that?
Yeah, that was a turning point in my life, definitely. In my late teens, early 20s, I would have said I was an atheist. I'd kind of experimented with faith as a younger teen and felt that God hadn't turned up, in a sense. And yet I got into this situation at the top of an ice climb. We'd been climbing all day. It was the last bit, but it was the steepest bit. And the light was going, and I had my ice axes in above my head, and I just felt I hadn't got any strength left. And I'd felt like that sometimes when I'd been climbing before, and when that had happened, I'd always fallen off. But I'd fallen off in a situation that was safe. You know, I plopped onto the rope and there was protection there. But in this situation, that just wasn't there. And I looked down, I thought, if I fall off here, that's me, and probably taking my friend with me as well. And so I'm hanging there thinking what to do, and I started praying. It wasn't rational. I didn't think, oh, I know, I'll pray. I just found myself praying, and the prayer was just a prayer of desperation, really. I just prayed, God, if you're there, get me out of this. And as I hung there, I thought, well, I haven't really got much to lose here. You know, and somehow if I'm praying, I need to trust. And so I remember loosening one of my ice axes and thinking, well, here we go. And I swung it. And as I swung it, I just prayed again, God, please let this be a good one. And it went into the ice first time, which was unusual because it had been really brittle. I'd had to work hard for every placement. And then the next one, oh God, please let this be a good one. And it went in first time. And over the next maybe 1 or 2 minutes, I just climbed with a strength that was not my own somehow. And I climbed it perfectly. It was amazing. And I flopped over the top. And I brought my friend up, and I had to pull my friend up on the rope more or less. And he said, oh, Steve, that was amazing. You know, how on earth did you do that? And to be honest, I just said, oh, that wasn't too bad. But actually, it was, as you say, a profound experience for me. And I didn't become a Christian at that moment at all. But what happened is I started a search. And over the next few months, I started reading things, I started having conversations. I had a friend who was one of my climbing buddies who I knew was a Christian, and particularly through some conversations with her, I started reading the New Testament, reading Gospels especially. And maybe 6-7 months later, went along to a little church that was open. I mean, there wasn't a service going on or anything. I just sat in there and prayed. Yeah. Perhaps a little more rationally than the first time, and just said, Jesus, I want to follow you. So yeah, it was a real turning point.
I want to ask you two things on the back of that. What is it about following Jesus that gives meaning to your life? Who is this Jesus? What is it about him that attracts you to him and makes you want to give your life to him?
So I said that before that moment when I went along to the church and prayed, I'd been reading the New Testament. And actually I remember I read Matthew's Gospel 3 or 4 times, just straight through. And at the end of that, I just found Jesus such a compelling person. You know, when he speaks with such wisdom. When he acts with such courage. And I don't believe you can read those accounts and be left cold by them. You know, I just thought, wow, gosh, this is who I want to follow. I think I was at a stage of life where I was wondering where life was going, what life was going to be all about, etc. And so there was something about this idea of a higher force, of a wisdom and a love that would guide me in life. And he's never disappointed.
Which kind of takes us back to the book and the thesis of the book, because again, rewilding the church, the sense that we've domesticated it and maybe have done that to Jesus. And might it be true? I mean, I love the church. I don't want to stand here accusing the church, but might it be that we have tamed Jesus in such a way that we've presented a less attractive character than the Gospels present, and maybe it hasn't been as appealing to people as we'd love it to be?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, like you, I love the church. It's family, isn't it? You know, we're brothers and sisters together. But yeah, absolutely. I think we've often kind of dumbed down Jesus to some extent. And that idea of the adventure of faith is not something we talk a lot about.
Yeah. Steve, there's so much in the book and we don't have time to talk about it all, but one of the themes that comes through strongly is connections. You speak about connectedness to the environment, to one another. Tell me more about what you believe about the importance of connections.
Yeah, I think that the importance of connection is true on so many different levels. So in the book we explore the interpersonal connection, and we look back to Celtic traditions of the Anam Cara, where people would have a soul friend, and how we lost that in the journey of church somewhere. And also about reconnecting with traditions of the church. So I draw a distinction in the book between traditionalism and tradition. So, you know, tradition has been called the living faith of the dead. So, you know, it's the good stuff, it's the stuff that's carried on generation to generation, whereas traditionalism is actually about anchoring ourselves in the past or anchoring ourselves in the present, not wanting to change anything. And if we look back in the history of the church, there are some key traditions, and what we tend to do is major on maybe a couple of those at a particular time. And in particular denominations, you know, we'll major on one or two of those and maybe neglect the others. And I'm suggesting that we need to reconnect with those big traditions of the church. So I draw the illustration in the book with what's called daylighting. So in cities around the world now, rivers that have been buried underneath concrete are being opened up. They're ripping up the concrete and it's creating a wonderful environment. And we need to kind of daylight these traditions and kind of put our roots down deep into them and rediscover stuff.
And you know, in terms of connectedness to the environment, I know absolutely I feel that when I come to somewhere like this, I'm so much at home. It feels like that inside. How do you distinguish between acknowledging the creation and the creator who is behind all that we see around us?
That's an interesting question, because I think there was a time in church history when that wouldn't have been a question.
Yeah.
And yet, as I was growing up as a young Christian, there was kind of almost a suspicion about being too keen on the creation and kind of blurring that boundary that you were talking about between creator and creation. But the fact is, the creation is full of the creator's fingerprints all over. I mean, you look around us here, and when you read in the Gospels about how Jesus expressed the kingdom, so often he's pointing to nature. And of course, nature and the kingdom have the same origin, the same creator. So actually, that we do need to reconnect with creation, because we're losing out on a great source of revelation and inspiration. So we mustn't be timid to do that. When Jesus talked about look at the birds, look at the lilies, the language there actually means take a really good look, take a careful look. So don't just glance at these things, but study them, learn from them. So I think, was it Calvin and Wesley, both wrote about this, saying that, the birds have got stuff to teach us, the trees have got things to teach us.
Birds and the lilies I can get, but I'm not so sure about what the midges are going to teach me, other than patience. Steve, let's finish up with this. You've written a book which is visionary in the sense that it points us beyond where we presently are. It offers a way, not a destination, but a way forward for the church. Let me ask you, if I had to put you on the spot, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful about the possibilities for the church as we go forward from this crossroads that we find ourselves in now, coming through the COVID pandemic?
Absolutely. So the last chapter in the book is called Hope. It's actually called Hope, from lament to trust. And lament is a big theme in the Bible. It's actually not such a big theme in our churches, I find. But if you look in the Psalms, getting on for half of the Psalms have that lament theme in them. And this morning I was reading Psalm 13. How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? 4 times, how long, O Lord? But then in those few short verses, we go on a journey, and we turn that eagerness for things to be different, we turn them Godwards, and we look to Him. And actually that psalm ends with an affirmation of trust, of faith. And so, I'm absolutely hopeful, but we need to kind of walk that journey. We need to turn our desire to see things being different in a Godward direction and walk with Him, and then the trajectory is absolutely hopeful.
Steve, thank you for sharing so much. I've read the book. I hope many others will do the same. It is exciting. It opens up all sorts of possibilities. Thank you for it, and thank you for bringing me here today out into the open and into this beautiful spot. It's been great speaking to you, Steve. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Always good to share the midges.
Thanks, Steve.